I'm audible now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, sir. Sir, if you permit, let us start, sir. Professor Jalote and Professor Rai, if you permit.
Yes,
Please.
Okay.
Start.
Okay. Thank you,
So,
sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Honorable Vice Chancellor, JUET, Professor JSP Rai, our honorable guest of today, Professor Pankaj Jalote, Registrar JUET Brigadier Arjun Rawat, heads of departments and senior faculty members from JUET Guna, JUIT Vaknaghat, JIIT Noida, and other attendees. A very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this very important session on building research universities in India in context of National Education Policy 2020 by an eminent personality, Professor Pankaj Jalote, a name every computer science professional is familiar with. We welcome Professor Jalote to JUET Guna virtually today. As you know, this campus, JP University, we are having three main campuses. Noida campuses, I think you have visited many times. Vaknaghat campus, 4 years back, I have requested you to inaugurate one conference, but due to some other assignment, you could not join us there. And JUET Guna, today you are joining us virtually, but hopefully very soon you will be physically, as the situation improves here, we will be able to welcome you here. So this university is situated in Guna, district Guna at Raghogarh. We offer courses BTech in mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, computer science and engineering, electronics engineering, like that, right? And we also offer some BSc and MSc courses along with the MTech, MSc and PhD programs. So as already we have discussed, I have told you, I have introduced you our Honorable Vice Chancellor, who is from Kanpur itself, and you are also associated with Kanpur. So now I would like to request our Registrar Brigadier Arjun Rawat sir to introduce our esteemed speaker to the audience and welcome him.
thank you, Tyagi sir. Good evening, friends and distinguished participants. We are indeed privileged that Shri Pankaj Jalote, distinguished professor and the founding director of Indraprasth Institute of Information Technology, Government of Delhi, will be interacting with us today. From what I understand, Professor Pankaj Jalote wears many hats. So as far as his academic credentials are concerned, he's been a Microsoft chair professor at IIIT Delhi. He's been head of the computer science Science and Engineering Department at IIT Kanpur, as well as an assistant professor at the University of Maryland at College Park in the United States. In a different avatar, when he took his leave from academia, I understand he's been Vice President Quality at Infosys Technologies, where he worked for 2 years, and also visiting research at Microsoft Corporation at Redmond for over a year. Coming back to his education, which we all have gone through the process, he is an alumnus of the very prestigious IIT Kanpur, from where he did his Bachelor of Technology in 1980. I was expecting a very much more older gentleman, but I can see that Pankaj is not only young in his demeanor, but also in his, I'm sure that's how he keeps young, by his constant innovation and learning. He's done his master's from Pennsylvania State University, and he did his PhD in 1985 from Illinois University, which I was seeing the twin cities of Urbana and Champaign. As a writer, we all know him a little better. He's the author of 5 very acclaimed books, including the one on project management, the capability maturity model in practice, which has been translated in many languages, including Chinese, Korean, and Japanese. He's also the, you can say, a best-selling author of that 1991 book, which many of our students use, on the integrated approach in software engineering. Based on his experience on actually setting up IIIT Delhi from scratch, where I was reading his blog that he was the first person, as also the senior most person setting up that place. And his mantra of, what he said, do first and then write. He has now recently authored this book, which we're going to talk more about, of Building Research Universities in India, which is published by Sage in November 2000 last year. He also writes a blog on higher education, very lucidly written. I read a couple on how the COVID impacted and this concept of blended learning, of teaching learning. I read very simply written. He made a small matrix and explains. I would recommend everybody, once we interact with him, to go through his writings, very crisply and very simply put, and yet it's to the point. And his homepage is there, besides Jalote at wordpress.com. And he also has written a number of articles in newspapers and leading magazines. I understand he's a fellow of the Institution of Electrical and Electronical Engineers, as also of the Indian National Academy of Engineering. So without further ado, I request Pankaj sir, we look forward to having a wonderful interaction with you. We are truly privileged. We've got a young, dynamic faculty of computer science, besides very veterans like my Vice Chancellor and Professor Arunachalam, I can see, and of course Tyagi sir. So I look forward to a very wonderful and educative interaction with you, sir.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for inviting. Thanks for the welcome and these very nice and kind words. What I'll do is, so as was mentioned, I'm assuming that most of the attendees are faculty members, senior administrators, heads, and senior faculty in the institute. In some institution, mostly from JIIT. So as you mentioned, JIIT, I've been to Noida multiple times, and I used to always think very highly of the institute. We hired quite a few PhD students from there as well, who actually ended up doing quite well as well. So what I'll do today is maybe try to do just a few key concepts, maybe 30-35 minutes, and then leave about 20 minutes for your comments, discussion, etc., rather than a long lecture, right? So let me share my screen, and then we'll get going. Okay. All right. So, and from point to point, I read the NEP. Actually, I read the 2019 version. From point to point, I'll mention about NEP also. But my main interest is this particular thing. NEP I've sort of studied a little bit. Okay, so here is what 3 things we're going to discuss. Just a little bit about what research universities are. I mean, people have all kinds of concepts, so let's clarify it. Let's put our research universities in the global context. And then let's discuss the main topic, what one should do to build research universities, right? So maybe about 5-7 minutes for the first 2, maybe 20 minutes for the last topic. So now it is broadly recognized that there are 3 key missions of the university. So education, which is all aspects of education, designing the program, the curriculum of courses, teaching, assessment, etc. Right? All in. This was the original mission of universities and still remains primary mission for all universities, research or otherwise. Research, which was new knowledge creation, that got added in 19th century by the Humboldt model, right? And over time, it was found that it was synergistic with the education mission. And then third mission, which is something got added maybe in the last 2-3 decades ago, which gained traction, is direct contribution to society through innovation, entrepreneurship, and outreach, right? And that's why you see lots of activity about startups and so on and so forth, right? Now, for this discussion, a university is any organization empowered to give degrees. It does not need to have a name university in the word university in its name. So MIT is a university, IIT is a university, JIIT is a university. And of course, Delhi University is a university. So these 3 missions exist for all universities. All universities engage in these 3 missions. the degree of involvement really changes from research intensive to teaching intensive. That's really that. So it's not that research universities only do research or that non-research universities don't do research. Every university, these are the three missions. What is the importance you attach and where do you spend your energy? That decides whether you are research intensive or teaching intensive. So research universities are those that are research intensive. The research mission dominates and the other two leverage the research strength. Right? So it's not that they're doing three very diverse things. So the research mission dominates, but the other two are linked to the research mission. So the faculty efforts, the research is the primary focus. Faculty effort goes mostly in research, but teaching remains an important mission. It is a first mission of the university. But in research universities, it gets connected more tightly to research. The third mission, innovation, in a research university will get to be research driven. So not just another e-commerce company or another this thing. The third mission in terms of entrepreneurship may be a deep tech based innovation, right? So research feeds into innovation. Now, so this is the qualitative explanation of what a research university is, right? Now, research universities can also be separated through classification schemes, right? So Carnegie classification is the oldest known, which was done in US from 70s onwards. Now, we tried to adapt and adopt the Carnegie for the Indian situation. And we said a research university is one where the number of PhD faculty, that is the faculty with PhD, is more than 75%, because only then can you be research intensive. And there is an average of one PhD student per faculty. So this measure, Carnegie also really relies on PhD students, PhD graduates as the main criteria for separating. Right? The analysis we did shows that in India there's about 70 research universities which will satisfy this category. Okay. So first question is, when we talk about research and research university, we must really address why do we need to invest in research, particularly in a poor country like India? Why not use research knowledge created by Japan, the Western world, China, this, that, and just use it? After all, mostly it's in public domain. Develop it for nations' use. Right? We must have an answer to this. First of all, it's very clear, innovation and development which rests on new knowledge, and that's where the new economy is. So you need to do that. But when the research is done, it is now well established that besides the published knowledge, there is some tacit knowledge, which is not transmitted through publications of papers. So the closer you are to research, the more you're going to innovate. Okay, so if you want to be an innovation-driven economy, which all big economies have to be, you need to have R&D in your own system. Okay? Then if you want to partner in the global science technology fraternity, a country like India, you want to be a player in the overall ecosystem of research, soft power, respect by others that you have scientific prowess and so on. And of course, we know strategic needs and self-reliance. You can't rely on other research of other countries to help you do that, right? We've seen that in the past for India. And of course, there are going to be research problems, local problems, which can be posed as research problems that will not be addressed by other countries. They are looking at only their interests or developed countries. So we need to have our own capability. So therefore, first I want to emphasize that strong research capabilities are essential for any aspiring nation like India, aspiring and large with so much capability. Okay, so that we want to put it to rest, because when I was a student, this was always a thing. Why do we say, why should we be talking about high tech and new and latest technologies and so on? But now the second question comes. Why do we need research universities? You can do research by setting up a whole bunch of research labs or ask companies to do research. right? These are the three main entities where research is done: research universities, research labs, and corporations. I mean, they are in their own labs, right? These are the three places where 95% of the research gets done. There are some other smaller ones, right? So the reason why you need research universities, first of all, the research universities form the core of the overall research ecosystem. The other two, the government labs and the R&D in the industry, after all, it needs research manpower. Where is it going to come from? The only place it gets created is research universities. Okay, so first of all, just for research ecosystem, you need research universities. That's the nucleus. The other is the overall higher education system, and I have another slide. It's a pyramid. If you want, and the research universities sit at top, if you want faculty, high quality faculty to go to the next level, universities, you need a very strong higher research university. Also, these research universities provide leadership in higher education. I mean, world over, the new programs, the new courses, the new textbooks, they all, by and large, often come out of research universities. Okay, and then there are other reasons: global cooperation in science, having neutral experts. If you want globally ranked universities, only research universities have a chance. Okay, so for strong research capability, a strong research network, a strong network of research universities is essential. Okay, so that's the reason why we need research universities. And the overall higher education system, and this is where NEP has been very clear. And this has been proposed for a fair amount of time, that higher education can be seen as a three-tier system. NEP has very clearly articulated it. So research universities are at the apex of the pyramid. Research is the focus. A small percentage of overall students get educated there. Teaching intensive universities, they provide bulk of the education. But they also engage in research to ensure that their education has some recent knowledge. And then there is colleges which are only for education. They rely on established body of knowledge, and their goal is to just educate, no research. Okay, that's the model which NEP has proposed, which is all very good. Research universities will form a small portion of this overall system, maybe less than 10%. Okay, but without this strong research universities, the entire higher education system will suffer, because it is the top tier that is supposed to provide good faculty for the teaching intensive universities, perhaps also, and teaching intensive universities as well as the research universities provide good faculty for the colleges. Since we are not doing it, colleges take their own graduates and do it. That doesn't happen anywhere. You should get faculty for your own institution from the layer above, except for research universities. Okay. So I've already mentioned classification of research universities. Let me just, since I said, well, spend just 5-7 minutes on that. But there is a classification of research universities can be done. Carnegie classification is the oldest method, which also looks at research universities, master's colleges and universities, bachelor colleges and universities. Basic criteria is based on PhDs, and then they subdivide it. So the same thing was done for India. We looked at about the basic criteria, as I said, 75% PhD should have, faculty should have PhD, and then we applied this criteria, and the number of PhD students should be on an average one per faculty. We applied the basic criteria to top 100 engineering institutions and top 100 universities in India, based on NIRF. So 40 universities satisfy this criteria, 32 engineering institutions satisfy. So altogether, about 70 institutions can be classified as research universities. Now, this is a reasonable number, actually. And the classification work, similar classification work has been done in China, Korea, and they also list, I believe Japan also, they all list about 50 odd universities as research universities. Of course, America has a much larger, maybe 300-400, right? Okay, so I want to just pause here. This was my first point, namely research universities. So what is research? Why is research important? Why is research university the core? You cannot get research done in a meaningful manner. You cannot get higher education as a strong this thing without strong research universities. And the tier and the layered system that NEP proposes is a nice way to look at it. Okay, so research universities are important, and a differentiated higher education system which has already been launched in India now. Okay, now let's go to the second point. I'll spend another 5-7 minutes on the Indian higher education. So this chart on the left is the growth of the universities, that is degree granting institutions. So you can see essentially it is two linear segments. So one was this thing, right, from 1975 to about 2000. You can see almost a linear growth. And then from 2000 to now, you can see another linear growth. But the growth is in this thing, that is the growth in this century, is about 5 to 6 times the growth in the previous century. The point to note is that most of our universities have been created in this century. All right, 65% or so. And the growth has been most rapid here. So we've been in the modern higher education system, we are sort of relative newcomer, India in general, right? And this is, of course, of colleges and enrollment, and you'll see similar sort of growth there. Now, one thing we did was to understand, we did a work of trying to compare the top 200 in THE ranking to the top 100 engineering institutions and top 100 universities as per NIRF. Okay. We analyzed, looked at the age, size, and funding. Just these 3 factors we analyzed. I'll give you a summary of it. If you're interested, you can go and look up the paper. It's available for download. It doesn't mean that these are the only factors that matter. There are a lot of cultural, economic, societal values which was not considered, but this was just some quantitative factors which give you a handle. And this was the summary. That in size of the world's best research universities, 70% of them have faculty of more than 1,000. Only 6% have less than 500. Indian situation completely reverse. 80% of the Indian universities have less than 500 faculty members. Only 2% have more than 1,000. Okay. Similarly, in terms of students, in the world top universities, 90% have more than 10,000 students. 60% have actually more than 20,000 students. In India, 60% of the universities have less than 5,000 students. And only 15% have 10K. So the size of the research universities globally is very large in terms of faculty and students. The size of the Indian top universities and top institutions is small. Okay, so that's the point to know. And then size is very important in terms of if you want to do research. Age is something you can't do anything about it. But just as a point of to note, world's top about 80% of them were created before 1950. Before we got independence. In India, 90% of them have been created after 1950. So we are a late comer. So, we'll make an impact sort of later in the game, I guess. Okay. So let me just this is the numbers I showed for size. We just discussed it. So basically complete reversal happening in India in the top universities. All right. Research funding is the other aspect which is extremely important. And I just looked at the research funding average per faculty member expenditure in the bottom of this THE was about $0.5 million. In India, the per faculty expenditure in the top 30 universities was just about 0.5. So at the bottom universities there is 0.5, here it is 0.1. The average research funding in top 100 universities in India is about 20 crores a year. Average per faculty is just about 5 lakh in the top universities. In the US, the average R&D funding of the bottommost category of the research university is around $30,000. Okay, so all this is pointing out is we are heavily under invested in research in universities. Okay, and just to mention, size matters immensely. Larger faculty will do more research, will have more disciplines, therefore interdisciplinary research, there are more chances of impactful research. And then if you have a larger student base, then you will graduate more students, you'll make bigger contribution to society, therefore a larger influence, therefore more your reputation and so on. So size matters immensely, no matter which way we look at it. Okay? And funding is another this thing, because you need funding for research universities, for PhD program students, high quality infrastructure, and research faculty have to have lesser teaching load, so you need more faculty, etc. Okay, so for funding, again, the NRF, the National Research Foundation that has been proposed in NEP, is a very good step. It is proposing a much bigger corpus for spending. It has 6 or now I believe 8 fields in which it will do it, and it is proposing or promising level playing field for private and public. Okay, so I'll just pause here and move on to the last point. So this point was about our top universities or research universities in the global context. And what we should see is that our universities tend to be very small, both in faculty and students. Therefore, the possibility of making bigger impact is in research as well as society is that much smaller. And our funding in the education ecosystem is much lower. Okay, so I won't have time to get into funding more, but part of it is that in India, in many of the developed countries, that some of them that I studied, of the government fund that goes in R&D, the vast majority goes to universities now. Even UK, I think 2 or 3 times the amount of money the R&D money that is spent in labs, the R&D money in universities is 2 to 3 times that much of the government money. In India, of the money that is spent in labs, only 10% of that is spent in R&D in universities. So we still are investing our money, research money, on the lab side, not the higher education side, while the world has moved and recognized that other than critical technologies and critical areas, the best place to do research is to get it done in research universities. And so they'll set up centers within the research universities. Okay, so the last point we want to discuss for the maybe next 20 minutes or so is building research universities, right? So for that, let's look at what are the key characteristics of research universities. Okay, this is not an exhaustive list, but it's an important list of important characteristics. Okay, we'll discuss a few of these. Okay, and you can reflect upon in your own context which of these you're strong at, which of it that you need to do something on. Provided, I mean, by the way, not every university needs to be a research university. We've said even in the universities, just about 10% are research universities are good. And by the way, the new NEP, at least the 2019 version, they envisaged that in the near term, they will identify about 100 universities as research universities and support them. And in 15-20 years, they imagined or expect that number to go up to about 300 or so. Okay, by then they expect all colleges to be autonomous, all universities, of course, to be autonomous. So right now we have 1,000 universities. By then we'll have maybe 10,000 universities and colleges altogether. So still, the research universities will remain less than 10%. So not every university ought to aspire to be a research university. Now that does not mean that you don't do research. Right? We've already established any university ought to be doing some research, and you can decide. You don't have to be at the top of the pyramid. It's a continuum. So you can decide, and playing at the top is going to be very, very expensive. The top 100, 200 research universities is going to be expensive venture. But you can be an education-focused research university also, where you give primacy to education, but reasonable amount of research. Or, of course, you can be education-dominant university with minimal research. So it's a continuum. Or you can go to college where you only do education. So let's look at the research university's key characteristics, right? So there are some that I've listed here. Faculty effort goes mostly in research. This is their primary mental occupation in terms of work. Okay? While they do teach, but if you talk to faculty, where are their challenges, where do they spend their time, it will be related to research. Faculty is hired and promoted for research only. Or primarily, not only, primarily for research. And you have to have complacency prevention measures that faculty doesn't become complacent and just do their teaching and sort of get promoted, right? That doesn't work for research university. It can completely be fine for teaching-oriented university. A vibrant research culture, we'll discuss that in a moment. A substantial and high-quality PhD program, absolutely critical to a research university. You cannot have a research university without this. Active sponsored research program where you're getting funding from industry, from funding agencies, from multinational agencies, etc. High quality education. Now it may look counterintuitive, but the highest quality of education, particularly in sciences and technology and emerging areas, is actually in the best research universities. In India, you look at it, IITs where you probably get it. In the world, you look at it's the top universities, MITs and Caltech and so on, where you get the best education as well, right? And that's because they take leadership in education. So it's not their role in education is not just to educate, but to take leadership so others can learn from their education and improve the education. So they have a very important role to play in education. Academic freedom and autonomy. Okay, that's something inherent in a research university. Research-driven innovation, as I mentioned, there's a lot of talk of innovation now, but if you're just doing business innovation or, next e-commerce or somebody, selling something, that's not for research university. You want to have a research-driven innovation, so research leads into innovation. It has to be well-funded. It has to have good infrastructure, good administration, support for research, etc. We'll briefly discuss a few of these. Okay, there are some enablers also. We'll discuss maybe one of them. Okay, research culture. Okay, it's an amorphous, qualitative, subjective feeling. But what is a research culture? So research culture, I'm just adding what is culture and you add research to it. It's a set of beliefs, values, attitudes, practices, customs, etc. that you have in your university for supporting and promoting research. Do you have a value and belief that we ought to publish in the top place? Do you have a value to cherish, hey, look, somebody got a very high research award? Do you have practices that will support such that people can publish in the, come up with the best results and publish in the best forum? Do you have good customs and practices where research networks within the universities can emerge, etc., right? These are all part of the research culture. In many universities, unfortunately, in our country, the research culture is very, very weak, and mediocrity thrives. So that, to my mind, is one of the central issues in our research universities, that we don't have the culture for striving high for research, striving to reach some excellence, getting great quality research, discuss research, etc. So some of the aspects of a good research culture, I mean, how do you know whether a university has a good research culture or not? Right? You go and visit a university, talk to a few people. How do you know it has a good research? Now, there isn't a science behind it, but I just put down some ideas how I would assess. So is there expectations of high quality research set in? Or is it just expectations that you should publish something? Maybe Scopus Index, because that's what UGC asks. That's not high quality. That's some acceptable, some fairly low level of quality. Okay, is there expectation of high quality? What is the result doing? Where is it getting published? Who is citing it? What is the impact of it? Okay, you talk to, you can find out. It's not very hard. You find out the aspiration of faculty, you get a sense of whether they're expecting, whether this university and they themselves expect to do high quality research. Strong motivation of faculty and research scholars for research. You cannot get people who are in faculty positions as a job and scholars because they have getting some stipend and so they can sort of relax a little to do good research. They must have strong personal motivations to be faculty or a research scholar. They must have drive for motivation. If they join faculty or research scholar for some other reasons, they're never going to have high quality output there because their motivation is very different. You have to promote interaction between faculty around research. Okay? We talk a lot of things in universities. I know in places I've gone, people will talk politics, people will talk, difficulties and complaints, but people don't talk research. But in some good places I've visited, you go, people are having coffee and they're talking about a research problem. It encourages collaboration internally and externally. So you're not competing with the guy next door. You should collaborate with the guy next door. You may even collaborate with people outside to do good research. Are there people who are actively applying for sponsored research with industry, with this thing? Rewards for good research. Is there some reward, peer recognition? You say, wow, this person has gotten this work done. Great. Somebody has done good research. There's some reward for it. Good work ethics, very, very important. There's an old paper called You and Your Research by Hamming, and it just says, unless you put in a fair amount of work, you can't be expected to be a great researcher. Okay? Other than people who are sheer brilliant, most of us mortals have to put in work to do good research. And research ethics. Research far more requires ethics because in some sense it's pursuit for knowledge. If we don't have ethics there, then there is a challenge. So these are some aspects which you can, if you go and visit a place or objectively try to think about some campus, your own institute, and sort of apply these and extend it, you'll get a sense of how strong your research culture is. And remember, not every university needs to have a very strong research culture. Okay? So just because it may not be as good as some other place doesn't mean anything. It depends on your mission. But if you aspire to be a top research university and don't have research culture, then there's a challenge. Faculty recruitment and management. So the research performance and potential that must be assessed for recruitment. Faculty promotion must be rigorous with research performance. And this is something that doesn't work in our country. We have rules that if you become that much serious, senior, you will get promoted. I mean, there is no way you can get research done that way. And if you want promotion based on research, you need to have regular review and feedback. Without feedback, any system will degenerate. Okay? This is again a place where we are very, very weak in our country. Because review and feedback is a very complex, cumbersome exercise, requires lots of effort, and it's a hard burn. It's difficult to do fairly, so many people don't do it. Most universities don't do it. Mentoring, people need help, especially when you're growing. Younger people in particular need help. Mentoring, what should be your goals next year? These can really help. And my favorite has been preventing faculty complacency. This was the foundation of building of IIIT Delhi. Okay, I realized that this is what is happening. So we had a 5-6 prong strategy to prevent faculty complacency. This was the centerpiece in most of our policies, because I believe complacency is perhaps the bane of Indian academia. People get complacent, permanent jobs, regular increments, you move on, you get promoted. So there's huge complacency. Okay, so there are various ways you can avoid complacency, and one has to think creatively, but you have to do it. And world over, people have done it. Substantial and rigorous PhD program. So the PhD program is the backbone of a research university. It is really the PhD program that separates a research university from the rest. Remember the criteria for Carnegie? A research university is defined just based on the PhD graduates. The criteria for Indian universities says on an average you must have one full-time PhD student for each faculty. So it's really speaking separates the research university from the rest, because full-time PhD students cost. Of course, to have PhD students guided, you will need labs and so on. So it shows, and you need the right kind of faculty, and the faculty teaching load has to be modest if they can guide PhD students, etc., etc. So it actually encapsulates a lot of characteristics into this one, the PhD program. Okay, but it's not just in numbers. A rigorous PhD program with high expectations and a large number of scholars, both. That is, it's a rigorous PhD program as well as you have a decent number of scholars. That can have a huge impact on your PhD, on your research. Okay, but there is, when I started studying, I realized the PhD program globally is undergoing a change. It's not just, and we still haven't gotten around to it. But there is a need to refine PhD programs objectives in the light of the current world where knowledge is changing dramatically. Knowledge is tied a lot more to innovation, and globalization is there. So there is not only do you need some published work, but you need wide knowledge. You need translational capabilities, so knowledge can be applied to innovation and so on. Right. So this is a very important thing. I have a very nice chapter on PhD program in my book. Right. High quality education, as I mentioned, research universities have high quality as a very key mission. Don't think research universities have to do less. Yes, each faculty member has to teach less. In research universities, you will have faculty members teaching 2 to 4 courses a year, right? The best universities, research universities, will have 1 course a semester. Most would have 3 courses a year, and then there would be many research universities globally that will be doing 2 courses a semester. But rarely would you find research universities more than that. But so the load may be less, but education is taken very, very seriously because they play a different role. First of all, teaching research nexus has to be there, right? It's not teaching is a different activity and research is this thing. So you can have some research-oriented courses. Your courses are have some element of latest research into them. Okay, undergraduate students allowed to do some amount of research. So research becomes embedded in teaching to some extent, right? So that's the teaching research nexus is leveraged. Then, of course, the research universities are the ones which will create new courses, new syllabus, new labs, new programs, and so they have to provide leadership. Whether they like it or not, they have this role. People look up to research universities, top research universities to do it. So they have to, the high quality education is a very important issue for them. So interdisciplinary programs through minors, dual majors, those are just kinds of things that they should do. Support for effective teaching and learning, providing training modules for teachers so they can teach well, feedback loops for improving, rewarding teaching excellence. All this is a part of high quality education. Governance and autonomy, right? So research universities are very complex. Okay, I like to believe that they are more complex than even many of the corporations, simply because they have multiple objectives. A corporation typically has profit and revenue as the main objective. In fact, that's not an objective of a research university. High quality education is there, high quality research is there, public service is there, and there is some tussle between them. So when you're dealing multiple goals, it's a very, very complex thing. Plus the fact that you don't have the kind of authority that exists in a corporation. You cannot order a faculty member. You cannot say, you do this research. I mean, that doesn't exist because there is academic freedom, right? So it's a very complex thing. It needs very good governance. And there is some aspects of good governance is that the university should have full autonomy with accountability, right? These are all fairly detailed things. We can sort of discuss if needed. Shared governance with faculty, because faculty is the heart of a research university. So while you of course need a vice chancellor, director, but a lot of power rests in governance, power rests with faculty, not just head, but deciding the policies, deciding various things. The faculty is an empowered faculty. They feel that they are really driving the policies in the university. Academic freedom is a basic tenet. Academic freedom means that a faculty member can research on any topic that he or she wants. And while you don't have full freedom in teaching anything, because the course have to be approved and so on, but once the course is approved and the learning outcomes are known, then how the faculty member delivers those learning outcomes is left to the faculty member. Okay, so that's the academic freedom there. Strong and visionary leadership is essential. You must have, if the leader is not a good academician, he doesn't have good vision as to where to take the university, if you cannot work with diverse stakeholders like faculty, students, you can't lead a research university. You can lead a college, you can lead a university, but not a research university. And of course, you have to be an able administrator to manage all the things. Okay? And it's an important thing, not perhaps for JIIT, but for public universities. The leader selection must be by the university. It's a fundamental flaw in our public system, because if the leader is selected by a body outside the university, then the leader is answerable to that body, not answerable to the university. Completely, strange model. If it's like a CEO of a company is to be selected by someone outside the company. You have to have the leader selected by the university or the board of the university, of course, board, senate, some body of the university, and answerable and accountable to that body. So theoretically, that body can fire the CEO or the director or vice chancellor. That's how globally it is. In our case, it's outside the university, which appoints the vice chancellor or director. Therefore, the director vice chancellor can only be fired by that body, is answerable to that, and therefore, there is, really speaking, inherently there isn't a reason why you should serve the university community. NEP is great, by the way. It promotes a lot of autonomy. It gives rules for how the board ought to be structured, the fact that directors ought to be appointed by the board, and various other things. So let's hope the NEP it brings about these changes. Active research program, it sort of is very clear. the main point I want to make is research program is not just about getting money. It's important, but it ensures, because you're going to get money from funding agencies, from industry, it ensures interaction with the industry and the funding agencies, and therefore some alignment with the industry needs and national needs. Okay, that's very important. It provides motivation and a certain amount of push from the sponsor. So this, as I mentioned, which requires an enabler, because you can't get research funding if research funding is not available. So that's an enabler that is required. And the National Research Foundation is a step in the right direction. As I said, it's looking at, I think, 50,000 crore corpus and multiple areas. And so it should be pretty good. It also requires, if you want to research this thing, it also an enabler is required, is that the research investment by R&D investment by industry should increase. Okay. In India, by the way, turn of the previous century, it used to be about 20%. Thankfully, it has been increasing, gone up to 40%. In most of the developed countries, of the total research investment, the bulk of research investment is done by the private industry. Right? We are not there yet, but the good thing is that R&D investment from the industry is increasing. It's up to 40-50% now. So that's a good thing. And my last, this thing, now how do you convert or build new universities, research universities? Of course, the first is the new Greenfield Research University. IIIT Delhi was a Greenfield university. So that requires a huge investment, land, dynamic leadership. It's a slow process. The second is actually very common, converting an existing narrowly focused research university, maybe teaching university, maybe an engineering university, into a large multidisciplinary research university. That's actually the path that has been taken by much of European and US universities. Okay? So that's clearly a well-established, well-trodden path. So for example, in India, some existing narrowly focused either by discipline or because they focus too much on education, but they often have land and old infrastructure which can be redeveloped. So they can convert themselves to large multidisciplinary research universities. Okay, so that's the second path, which is open to both private and public universities. The third, which is sort of more for public universities, is of mergers. That's something we haven't tried in India. In India, we tend to break universities into smaller universities, but mergers are a big thing which has happened in many, many countries. In Australia, that was a big thing that has happened. France is trying it, and France, they want to create a France MIT, and they've done that by merging 10 plus institutions. So they are also doing something like this. So I believe we ought to try it, but then that really makes sense in the government scheme of things, because the government owns the universities of different silos. They own the labs, they own various things. So whether they want to try something. Okay. So I'll end with this. Active research in a country is essential for the modern world, and research universities are the nucleus. Without strong research universities, both the research ecosystem as well as the higher education ecosystem will suffer, as we have been seeing in our country. Universities can move from teaching focused or narrowly focused to research focused. Many have done it across the world. Okay, there are many characteristics of research universities. You have to develop them, imbibe them. And the level of research, by the way, just because you want to aspire to be a research some university does not mean that you must be at a very top, because that can be very expensive. It's a balance between teaching and research. And depending on how much investment, where you can pitch your balance, that's the place you can be. So as I said, even teaching universities should be doing some research. Research intensive can be doing very high research and lesser teaching. You can be in between depending on where you can do. Okay, but we must have strong support and expectations by the universities and the country for research universities to thrive. All right. And I will end with this. So this is the book that was referred to in the start. If there are some leaders and you haven't been able to get a copy for any reason, please send me a mail. I'll be happy to send you a complimentary copy if that's needed. And this is an offer which I'm giving this kind of talk in some other places as well. I'm happy to provide help and guidance for improving research, education, culture in any higher education institute. It's all pro bono. There's only one condition. The university itself should want to improve. If that's not there, I can't help, and I don't want to spend my time doing so. Okay, so it's pro bono. That's not the issue. One just has to say, hey, look, we as a university or faculty want to do something. Hey, look, Pankaj Jalote happens to have some knowledge. Let's take his input. I'm happy to. Okay, and I just added, because for last point, I know in many places faculty mentoring can be very useful. Okay, because we have a lot of young faculty, because our whole education system is young. Okay, for research, for effective teaching, both of these can be very useful. And if a university wants to explore some mentorship, this, that, again, I'm happy to explore the possibility of helping. As I said, my main goal is just to help, and therefore all these are essentially pro bono. Okay, thank you very much. I think we still have another 15-20 minutes for some discussion, if that's okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. If anyone is having some question,
Yeah,
he can write in that box.
We'll end by 4:45 latest.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if you want to type in, I will read your this thing, or if you want to speak, then unmute yourself and then speak.
Sir, I have a question. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Sir, during your talk, you mentioned the difference in the size of international and Indian universities.
Mm-hmm.
So has there ever been an effort to integrate some of the universities to maybe match them in size like we did with the banks? Has there been an effort of that kind?
So that's something I've been writing a little bit about. I really hope so. I really hope so. We have really, you see, let me just, I think in India we believed for quite some time that we can't handle scale.
Okay, sir.
I think till about last century we thought, well, we are a poor country, lesser capability and so on. Actually, in my own mind, I never thought we can crack scale. But I think these IT industry and many other companies now,
okay,
they have shown that in India we can manage scale at a very high level. I mean, IT industries are 300, 400,000 people, many of them above 100,000 people.
right. Sir.
So and the government is also now looking at it. So I hope that what they're trying to do with banks and other places, that scale is important. You are steering away by the leadership is very limited. You are not going to get 100 great leaders, but you may be able to get 5 great leaders.
Definitely, sir.
So I hope they do.
Right. So another question regarding undergraduate studies in research universities. I mean, how does it align?
Okay.
Does it interfere or?
Okay, so it both aligns as well as interfere.
Yes.
First of all, let me pose it this way: you take away undergraduate education from research universities, I bet they will decline in due course.
Okay.
Because the process of education, remember, these are the top students coming. It's the research universities are educating only the top 2, 3, 4% of the students.
Yes.
Right? So the top students are coming. They expect and demand the highest quality education. So the faculty is always on the toes. So the process of teaching such students is very important in terms of gaining this thing. The second is, it is these students who are becoming the future researchers, top researchers. They are the ones who are becoming the top class researchers after doing PhD. In India, unfortunately, it doesn't happen because our top students who go in research end up going abroad often. But it funds your PhD this thing. So if you leave that out, it's going to be a trouble. So, but it does conflict in the sense it takes time. So most of the research universities which want to focus more on research, they have balanced it by a relatively modest teaching.
Okay. So is there a model for, I mean, probably segregating it at some level or something like that?
What do you mean segregating?
As in, within the university, maybe the research wing or something like that.
No,
Has
you
it been
can do
attempted?
something like, you can do, I mean, we started that. In US also, they have it in some different way. But you can have sort of research faculty, regular research faculty. You can hire some more teaching faculty. Say you are expected to do more research and somewhat less teaching. You are expected to do much more teaching and somewhat less research, right, etc. So you can do, you have to balance teaching and research. And it's only few very top ones which will say all our faculty is going to be research faculty. Only the top ones do that.
Okay.
The others will say, okay, we have 500 faculty, we'll have 300-400 regular research faculty, but we'll also have 100-200, faculty, 100 faculty, which are going to be predominantly looking at teaching. So they may be teaching 3 courses a semester or whatever it is, 2.5, whatever it is, and high quality teaching. But they'll engage less in it. So you can work out models.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Wonderful talk.
Thank you.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon.
Yes, Dr. Mahesh.
Yes, sir. Sir, I was wondering about, have you analyzed the economically feasible model for research universities?
So again, you'll have to, there is a whole chapter in financing, and we've discussed it. You'll have to go to I didn't want to cover it. It's, finance and governance. There is a whole lot of other issues, right? So I kept it very simple about characteristics, but yes, of course it's there. And there is some, now in India, many of these models have not played out yet. So there is some models, in India, we are not sort of following very good models yet. And also the Indian universities are still research, the university system is way too young. So in US and many other places, for example, the private universities have become, are now so old that they have huge corpus. So, by the way, all research universities are heavily subsidized. But the government research universities are subsidized by government grants. The private research universities get subsidized through their endowment returns. But research universities are expensive, they need funds. Somebody has to subsidize it. Now, yes, there is potentially a model that you can charge students that much to recover cost of research. It's somewhat possible, but some amount of subsidy, external support to support research is necessary.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Anyone else?
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Sir, good afternoon. Sir, I wish to just know your comments on how to inculcate the culture of innovation in private universities, wherein the resources are not too much. So, how to deal with this kind of situation, sir?
Okay, you're talking about innovation.
Yeah, in the students.
In the students, right? Okay, so you may not, I know innovation is a very, very in thing now, right? But I still consider that teaching and research as the main task. Innovation is tied to it, not a separate activity. So you can't really teach innovation. Right?
Yes,
you can teach a subject, you can teach how to do, you can have some sort of workshops to encourage creativity. You can have builders, makers workshop. And these are some of the things you can do, contests, which many private universities do. So you can start a makers workshop, for example, so people can, and you can, if it's a university, you create a course around it. We did that. First year students build projects where they put various things together, right? And those are not very expensive. You can do some workshop kind of things. You can do various other things to inculcate the fact that you can bring knowledge and different things together to create a new idea. But your focus ought to remain on education and research. With these things added, hopefully they will learn how to apply innovative uses of knowledge.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Yes.
Good afternoon, sir. I just want to ask how we can increase the number of patents. If I compare with China and other countries, they are in 10,000 plus in a year, and we are in few hundred. So some points from your side, sir.
So I have to change the question a little bit. How about number of papers? As I said, I see education and research as the main thing. I think we are putting the horse before the cart by educational institutions running after too much of innovation and patents. That's for the private industry to do. I know universities are also looking after patents, but by and large, the bulk of it is coming from the private sector. We ought to be focusing, universities ought to be focusing on research in this thing. China is 10 times possibly number of papers as well. That's where we ought to be looking at within the research university system. And if you're good at research, then some of those research is patentable. Earlier, researchers didn't care about patenting. Now they care. You can patent it. There is a process. It requires investment and money. But in research university, the core has to be from research. And once you get good at it and lots of research coming out, some of it can be repackaged into innovation as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Okay, I think there are no more queries. So
Great. Yes, we finished in time. Great.
yes, thank you so much, sir, for very wonderful talk, eye-opening talk actually. For your information, we also have one wind engineering research application center at our university, which
Great.
is one of its own kind in India. I
Very
think
good.
2 or 3 are only there, and
Very
it is in the process.
Very
Our
good.
director of Wind Engineering Application Research Center, Professor S. Arunachalam, is with us. I request Professor Arunachalam to inform about this Wind Engineering Application Center and also propose vote of thanks. Over to you, Arunachalam, sir.
Good evening, Professor Tyagi. First of all, let me thank you for giving this opportunity. And it has been a very wonderful lecture and informative and illustrious lecture given by Professor Pankaj Jalote on a very pertinent and relevant topic on the building research universities in India. And since you have mentioned about this Wind Engineering Application Center, initially just some few lines I would like to mention. This Wind Engineering Application Center has been established at this JUET with the vision of our founder chairman, Jai Prakash Gaurji, noting the importance of the future infrastructure development in the future years, where more and more tall buildings, design and constructions are to be there, for which wind loads are a very critical one. And in present condition, I basically come from CSIR, Structural Engineering Research Center. After serving about 30 years there, I have joined this institute, where the present wind engineering, this center is, the hallmark of this center is establishment of a boundary layer wind tunnel facility, where it is an experimental facility where we simulate the conditions of the wind and model the structures, and then we investigate the dynamic effects of this one. And only I will mention that this center, this facility is one of the world-class facilities, and presently in India, it is very much comparable with only in IIT Kanpur and SARC, we have such type of simulation, particularly for civil engineering applications and other things. So this is presently this has been commissioned, and we are now continuing some projects also. Now I will come back to the today's presentation, where Professor Jalote has, in the initial, he has very well explained the need for why we invest in research itself. It is a very important aspect which he has touched, and he also said that one investment in research is one aspect, and investing again research university. He has very clearly brought out the very importance of every university is there, but the degree of focusing the research and the degree of focusing on teaching. And he has very well pointed out that in research university, the research is the primary focus, although to a small extent, education is also being there. And then he has also talked about the middle level, where higher education system, where teaching will be more primary with research. You see, basically, if you consider any faculty, the two sides of his mind will always work for teaching as well as research. In a sense, they cannot be separable, but the degree to which how they are separated, and that way he has explained that research university, more focus will be there because it will be only in a very less number of graduates and other things, but the focus will be deep focus. And of course, he went on in explaining the various aspects. He compared with the conditions prevailing in our Indian university with global universities. Then he very pointed out very clearly the three important factors being the size, the age, as well as the funding. He also touched upon the nature of the government funding and private funding coming for some in US universities, another thing, the huge corpus being available, another things. And he also talked about the research culture. You see, it is very important because there should be a passion, there should be a motivation, there should be a passion-driven motivation. When it is there, then that type of a thing is required for continuing this research and other things. At the end, of course, he very rightly brought out that we as faculties in the university, we should more work towards the publications and papers and citations, and leave probably to some extent the innovations, and innovation is required, but the patents and other things maybe to the private other institutions which are research labs and other things. And of course, he also touched upon the faculty freedom, the academic freedom, and in all this, in every point, wherever appropriate, he was also mentioning that the new education policy is also giving more support and promoting these things. So in my, at the end, I would like to say, sir, your lecture has been, as you was told by Professor Vipin Tyage, a very good eye-opening, and it has been a very motivating lecture for all the faculties of our universities. I am very sure that we will go a long way, and your lecture, the points which you have taken, we will take it more in a positive and spirit, with a good spirit, and we will work towards that one. And I also, on behalf of our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor J.S.P. Roy, and Brigadier Rawat, and also on the behalf of every faculty of our university, on my own behalf, I would like to take this opportunity to thank for your illustrious lecture which you have delivered today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Professor Nathalan.
Great to
Thank
be
you,
there.
Professor
Bye,
Jalote.
everyone. Bye. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone who have joined us from Watnagar, Noida, and Guna. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
बंद कर दीजिए सर.